morning, everybody. This is attorney Sean Brennan with the Accident Recovery Team, and we are doing our new podcast, Accident Recovery Team Radio. I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, someone I've known for 20-ish years, probably. Gerald Amato is the principal, the owner of the Gerald Amato Insurance Agency. Gerald, you've got offices in Wichita and Butler County.
Wichita and Rose Hill, Kansas.
Yeah, so you've got Sedgwick County covered, you got Butler County covered, right?
We're there.
Right. Gerald has got a very prominent agency in town. And the reason we brought him in, number one, because he's a rock star. He's my personal insurance agent. I think you insure my house, you insure my cars. You pretty much have the Brennan family covered. We appreciate that. But secondly, Gerald, due to his experience, due to the volume of his business, knows more than anybody else, as far as I'm concerned, what someone should be looking for when they go to buy auto insurance, when they go to buy homeowners insurance. And so I think having him on to kind of walk people through that process is really going to be a benefit to everybody. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that. First of all, though, before we get to the policy itself, Gerald, I wanted to talk to you about how to go about buying an insurance policy. I can't tell you how many people come into our office, they sit down here, we start talking about what's in their policy, and I say, when you bought this thing, who did you talk to? And so many people say, well, I didn't talk to anybody. I went on, insurance.com or whatever it is, and I bought this thing, and I don't really know what's in it. And that's a problem because it's such an important financial product. I want to talk to you a little bit about what the process is when people come into your office, when they sit down and talk to you about buying insurance. So I'm a new customer. I want to know what's going on. I come into Rose Hill. I come into South Wichita to your office. I sit down, kind of walk me through what that process is.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Too many people they don't go out and get an agent. They don't have somebody giving them advice because every insurance policy has to fit what your needs are. And going through a computer and not talking to anybody, they are not guiding you, and you need that guidance. And so when you come into us, we want to explain what the policies are doing. We want to make sure that we're looking at your assets, we're looking at your whole picture, and not just trying to give you an insurance policy.
Yeah, you're not buying pants. I mean,
right.
This is not something that you can do that you've done 1,000 times before and that you sort of know. This is something that changes over time. Number one, because the policy needs to change as your family changes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. When you're younger, you don't have as many assets. As you start to grow, you create a family, you go through all the stages in life. And if you're not sitting down and reviewing your insurance with your agent, you're going to miss the boat on something. And if something happens, you need to have that protection. And that's the problem that a lot of people have.
Yeah, you're going to outgrow it if you don't sit down and modernize it. And the other thing about insurance is that if you sit down and you're not, familiar with the insurance business, you're not familiar with the terminology, you're prone to make a mistake because when you go on these websites that sell insurance, they don't explain all this stuff very well. They don't explain what all these limits mean in an insurance policy. An agent does that.
Right. And insurance has become kind of a commodity because people just want to get the least expensive price that they can pay, but that turns around and actually costs them money in the long run. So it's better to spend a little bit more money than to turn around and be out tens of thousands of dollars when something happens and you're not covered properly.
Yeah, right. I think there's a lot of people who make the mistake of knowing the price of their insurance and not knowing the value of it.
Exactly. And that's like I said, it has become a commodity because everybody wants to make it just price driven and not driven to protect what their needs are.
Yeah. So you come into your agency, you sit down, people are going to meet with you when they come in, or an experienced agent who knows insurance, knows homeowners, knows auto, knows life, right?
Absolutely. All of our staff, they go through extensive training. We want to make sure that we are not just being an 800 number. We want to make sure that we are giving you personal attention, understanding your personal needs, and building policies based on what you need because one size does not fit all.
Yeah, and speaking of personal attention, I will tell you one of the things I appreciate about you. I don't know what it was last month. I think we forgot to pay our auto insurance, and I get a phone call on my cell phone from your office. I think it was from Gina or somebody saying, "Hey, dummy, you didn't pay your auto insurance premium," which prompted me to call my wife and say, "Hey, we didn't pay our auto insurance premium." But a website isn't going to do that.
Yeah, they don't have that personal. They don't care.
No one's going to call my cell phone and say, "Hey, alert, you dropped the ball and you didn't pay your premium." So I don't know if I ever told you that, but that's something I just very much appreciated, that kind of service from you guys. That was great.
Things in life change and things do get overlooked. And so we're real people and we care tremendously about people's needs and making sure they're being protected. And things like that happen. It's not intentional. It's just, hey, life got busy, life got in the way, and it happens. And that's why we want to make sure that we're looking out for everybody.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about somebody comes in, they sit down with you, and they want to know about auto insurance. So let's start with auto insurance, right? The standard auto insurance policy has got a bunch of different coverages under it. I think maybe it'd be beneficial for you and I just to go through 2 or 3 of those coverages and talk about what they mean, what they are, and what people should think about when they're selecting how much insurance they should buy. Okay, so the first portion of an auto policy that I was going to talk to you about today is the BI portion. So if people see those initials, that acronym BI, what does that mean?
So in the policy, a lot of it has bodily injury protection and property damage protection. So when you see BIPD, that means bodily injury, and it'll show different numbers. The minimum in Kansas is $25,000 per person, $50,000 per accident. And then the PD portion is the property damage. So if you go out there and cause damage to somebody else's vehicle.
Yeah.
And
right.
so this is where the problem lies, is most people are looking for the least expensive policy. And now they buy a $25,000 policy and they think they're okay. And that's where we have to show them guidance and we're explaining this is protecting you if you injure someone else.
Right. And what a lot of people I think don't understand is that those minimum insurance limits for Kansas, that $25,000, $50,000 limit was set years ago. It was set years ago into Kansas law. And what that means is that if you hurt somebody, the most that $25,000 policy is going to pay to the person you hurt is $25,000.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you're looking at this policy, if you go out there and you cause an accident and you injure someone else, and that person has medical expenses, how far will $25,000 take you in the medical world today?
No, it's terrible. I'll tell you what, it used to be, I think when they set those limits, if you had to go to the ER after an auto accident, you might expect to have a $300 ambulance bill and a $2,000 ER bill. ER bills aren't $2,000 anymore. If you walk into a hospital in Wichita and you get a trauma charge, that's going to be a $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 bill itself, the ER bill.
Right. And that's why you do not want to go and buy that small limit, because it's $25,000 per person, but then it's also $50,000 per accident. So if there's multiple people injured in that vehicle and they're going to the ER, $25,000 is, like you said, it eats it up quick. And then $50,000, well, if there's 3 people in the car, there's still, you don't even have near
you're underwater
enough.
Yeah, you're underwater. So fortunately, although a $25,000, $50,000 policy is the minimum in Kansas, you don't have to buy that.
No,
yeah.
And I would not buy that. We do not suggest anyone to have those limits. We have to look out for assets. We have to look out for future incomes. We need to make sure that we're not just looking at today, but we're also looking at, future. Like we mentioned earlier, life changes and life progresses as you go.
Yeah.
And if you're starting off at a $25,000 policy, you're setting yourself up for failure if something happens.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, a compliment to you. Like I said, I think you've been my insurance agent for, years now. I don't know how long, but 20-some. Yeah. When I was younger, I had less insurance because I needed less insurance. As I've gotten older, you have, done a good job of kind of feeding me down that path of, your needs have changed, your policy needs to change, and my policy has changed as I've gotten older based on that advice. So I appreciate that. So you don't want a $25,000, $50,000 policy in most instances, right? What are some of the other incremental options people have in terms of raising that bodily injury limit?
So the typical options, it starts at the 25,000 per person, 50,000 per accident. And then the next level would be 50,000 per person, 100,000 per accident. And then 100,000 per person, 300,000 per accident. And then 250,000 per person, 500,000 per accident. And then it goes up from there. And then there's also something called a personal umbrella policy that hopefully we'll have time to touch on here in a moment.
Yeah. I think when people go online to buy insurance, number one, because it's not something they do every day, they don't necessarily have an appreciation for what those numbers mean. And insurance, unfortunately, is one of those things that you don't know you need it till you need it. And you don't want to need a $100,000 policy when you only got a $25,000 policy.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Sean. And I have clients that come in, that are in their 60s, and no one has ever explained to them what those numbers mean.
Yeah, terrible.
And it's very fortunate that they didn't have anything happen.
Yeah.
But had they had something happen, it's a scary world.
Well, and that's why you got to sit down with somebody.
Absolutely.
That's why you
need that advice.
Yeah. All right. So another portion of an auto policy I want to talk to you about is the acronym for it is PIP. What you and I sort of know it as is PIP. Tell us a little bit about PIP. What is that?
So PIP is called personal injury protection. So this is something that is required in the state of Kansas. So anyone that owns a title of a vehicle, they are required to have insurance, which means that PIP coverage comes into play. So what the personal injury protection is that is what pays before anything else pays. It'll pay for a portion of your medical. There's different levels that you can purchase for that. It also will pay for loss of income if you're unable to work because of an accident. It'll pay a little bit of coverage for funeral, cremation, or burial expense. So, and then it also pays survivor benefits, a portion for that as well.
A lot of them have essential services benefits on
and
them.
then essential service expenses.
I break my leg, I can't mow the yard, I got to hire someone.
$25 a day.
Right.
Not a ton of coverage, but it's something that is required by the state of Kansas.
Yeah, and it helps bridge the gap, right? I mean, if there's a gap there in your wages, if there's a gap in your medical, it kind of helps bridge that gap. One thing I think people need to understand is that although PIP coverage is required on an auto policy, Kansas law requires it on an auto policy, it's not required on a motorcycle policy.
You are absolutely correct. And most people do not want to purchase the personal injury protection on a motorcycle policy when they're looking at pure numbers, because the cost of PIP on a motorcycle is fairly expensive comparatively to the auto policy.
Right.
And if anyone does have a motorcycle, they should always have that personal injury protection coverage, because of that loss of income portion is really pretty critical.
Yeah, and getting back to the importance of having the conversation, right? I mean, if you're online buying an auto insurance policy, that website's not going to go through that conversation with you.
There's no advice. It's like you're trying to be your own doctor.
Yeah.
And figuring out what your diagnosis is.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody there that's guiding you through every process. And insurance is exactly the same way.
Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to talk about while we're talking about auto policies is uninsured and underinsured coverage, because it is a critically important piece of coverage that a lot of people don't even know they have or don't know they need. So walk through a little bit what uninsured and underinsured coverage is in Kansas.
So in the state of Kansas, insurance is required, but many people find ways of not doing it, or there could be a situation where they just didn't pay their insurance and they didn't realize they didn't, and so then the policy goes out of force. So then they cause an accident and hit someone else. Well, now they don't have any insurance, so you need to have that coverage for uninsured motorist coverage if someone hits you without insurance.
Right.
So that's going to pay, for example, if you have $250,000 per person, $500,000, that's going to pay for you and anybody inside your vehicle for the bodily injury portion if somebody hits you without insurance. And then the underinsured motorist coverage, basically the difference between that is that's going to supplement the difference from what that other person had up to the amount that you have.
Right. So I get hit by a guy who causes pretty substantial injuries. He or she does not have enough insurance on their own. If I've got a high enough underinsured limit, I can get money from the guy who hurt me, but I can get additional money from my own policy.
Right. And that, in your policy, if you're going to protect yourself, if you hurt someone else, you want to make sure that you have enough coverage to take care of those people. Well, you also want to make sure you have enough coverage to take care of you and your family.
Yeah.
And that's where that comes into play, to help out with those bodily injuries.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but a lot of times the bodily injury limit you purchase is going to be the same as your uninsured, underinsured limit, right?
absolutely, it should be.
Yeah.
We have seen policies where people don't, that they're a little bit different, but the cost to have that exactly the same is very, very nominal.
Right.
So,
Right.
And I always look at, and liability insurance is the most important part of any insurance policy, because that is your wall of protection. What you want to do is you want to have enough liability insurance to protect your assets. So if your assets are X number of dollars, then you need to have at least that amount of coverage for your insurance policy, because if something happens, we want it to hit that wall and bounce off and have no financial impact on you. It's when people can reach over that wall where the problem happens.
Problems.
Big
All right,
problem.
let's talk about the problem, okay? We have had instances in our law practice where we are looking at someone who has hurt somebody. They've run a light, they've crossed the center line, whatever it may be, and they don't have enough insurance to fully pay the claim. That has happened. And I will tell you right now, what we do as a service to our clients is we conduct a asset review of those people who are at fault in these accidents. And if we find that they don't have enough insurance and they have assets that they can use to make up the difference, well, guess what? They're getting a letter from us.
Absolutely.
And that letter says, hey, it looks like you don't have enough insurance, but it looks like you may have some assets that will make up the difference. They're going to get a letter from us. And at that point, it's too late for them to do anything about it. You can't go retroactively buy an insurance policy that's going to cover it.
Right, you cannot. So we don't know when an accident's going to happen, and we hope we never have one, but when we do, we need to make sure that we are prepared and let our insurance policy take care of the financial brunt of that accident.
Yeah, I mean, if you are driving around without enough coverage and you have assets, you have, you're a business owner, or you have rental property, or, you've got multiple vehicles, or you've got some kind of asset, that asset's exposed. And, if you do something to injure somebody and you don't have enough insurance, it might not be your asset anymore. I mean, unfortunately, that's just the truth of the matter.
And it's sad, Sean, because I have seen many people have to go into bankruptcy because they don't have enough coverage. They don't have that. Their wall of protection of liability is not near high enough what they need to be. And it's a really sad situation to be in. And
Yeah.
we care about our clients, and we don't want people to be in that position. And so when we're discussing this insurance, it is critical that people understand that. And I have other people, and I'll tell you this. Oh, well, I don't want that much insurance because that just means that the attorneys can come after that. They're going to come after me harder. And that is not correct. Can you touch on that for me?
Yeah, right. Here's the thing. I do not enjoy calling somebody, sending somebody a letter and saying, hey, you need to go talk to your banker about borrowing money against your land to pay off this accident. That's the last thing I want to be doing. And that's part of the reason we have you on here, is I want people to understand that I have an obligation to my client to pursue that path, and I'm going to pursue that path. If you're hurt and I represent you, you're going to get everything you've got coming to you.
Absolutely.
But I do not want to be getting into people's pocket necessarily. I want to be getting into Traveler's pocket. I want to be getting into American Family's pocket. I want to be getting into State Farm's pocket. And the way to do that is to make sure people get the message that they've got to have enough coverage.
And that's the purpose of insurance. Insurance is to transfer your risk.
Right.
And that's why people purchase insurance, is to transfer that financial risk. And so that is absolutely where people need to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
So, if you go out there and cause an accident and you disable somebody for the rest of their life, how expensive is that?
Right. Let's talk about, before we wrap up, I do want to come back around to something you mentioned earlier. A number of years ago, you sat down with me and you said, hey, Sean, you really need to think about getting an umbrella policy, which we did. And it amazed me the amount of coverage we were able to get for the price of the policy. I mean, it was not an expensive undertaking. Tell us a little bit real quick about what a umbrella policy is.
So the umbrella policy, when I was mentioning your bodily injury limits, so there's a requirement you have to have a $250,000 per person, $500,000 in your bodily injury limits on your main policy, on the auto policy. What an umbrella policy does is it gives you an additional $1 million worth of coverage to add to your auto liability and your homeowner's liability. So at this point, that is going to build your wall of protection. And for, $15 a month, you can add that extra $1 million because it also will build up your uninsured and underinsured motorist coverages. Yeah. And so if you go out there and you're disabled the rest of your life and you can't do what you do today, Sean, that's gonna be a big financial cripple to you.
Yeah.
And that's where we want the umbrella to come into play. So that way it's bridging that gap to help you survive future.
Those policies are a huge benefit. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. You have really been an asset to me for the last 20 years. And I appreciate the advice you've given. I appreciate everything you've done for us. And I would really encourage people that if you have questions about your insurance policy, if you have questions about whether your limits are appropriate, if you have questions about whether you're with the right company, give Gerald a call. Gerald Amato, you've got agency offices in South Wichita and Rose Hill. Why don't you go ahead and give us your phone number real quick?
So the telephone number is 316-687-4884.
All right, everybody, thank you very much.
And I wanted to also thank you, Sean, because we have sent clients your way because there is a time where they need your guidance. And in the amount of care and compassion that you have for these people, you are truly absolutely correct. You guys care.
I appreciate that.
And that needs to be clear because there's a lot of people that are in your industry that really don't care. They're just looking for the dollar. You're looking out for people like we do. And I do appreciate that about you guys.
That's good of you. Thank you. Everybody, I want to thank Gerald Amato for joining us today. If you have insurance questions, Gerald's contact information can be found on the description below. Hey, Accident Recovery Team Radio, it's been a fun day. I hope everybody got some information today that you're going to be able to use as you go forward. The lawyers of the Accident Recovery Team are licensed in Kansas and Kansas only. If you are unfortunate enough to live somewhere other than the great state of Kansas and have questions about an auto accident or an injury accident of any kind, you can still call the Accident Recovery Team and we can partner with an attorney in your state to help you get the representation you need. The Accident Recovery Team can be found at 267team.com or by calling 1-866-267-TEAM.